They had once marched as the spearhead of Adolf Hitler's ambitions defined by rigid discipline, ideological devotion, and battlefield ferocity to enemies and civilians alike. The Waffen-SS symbolized the dark fusion between fanaticism and military power. Across occupied Europe, their black uniforms and skull insignia became synonymous with terror. But in the chaotic spring of 1945, the vast organization that had grown to nearly 1 million men collapsed with astonishing speed and totality. For the surviving Waffen-SS soldiers, the end of combat did not signal the end of struggle. Instead, it marked the beginning of a far longer battle shaped by justice memory and the weight of a ruined ideology. By April and May 1945, scattered Waffen-SS detachments moved through a devastated continent. Some attempted feudal, last stands, others discarded uniforms and identification, while most surrendered as Allied armies advanced through the remnants of Nazi power. Long columns of Waffen-SS prisoners trudged along muddy roads toward improvised collection points. What Nazi propaganda once hailed as an elite brotherhood now appeared as a broken mass of fugitives, captives, and desperate survivors. The Allied powers acted quickly and decisively. Determined to dismantle the ideological core of Nazism, they ordered the complete dissolution of the SS, stripping it of legal existence authority and the reputation it once claimed. Combat divisions like Leibstandarte Adolf Hitler, Das Reich and Totenkopf, along with foreign volunteer regiments from the Baltics, Balkans, and Western Europe were rounded up. Their uniforms, once feared, became incriminating evidence of complicity and allegiance. Whether captured by Americans, British Soviets, or French forces, Waffen-SS soldiers faced immediate separation from regular Wehrmacht prisoners. Their affiliation alone placed them under deeper suspicion and harsher initial treatment. The collapse of the organization was total. Its hierarchy shattered, its archives seized, its camps liberated, and its soldiers left to confront a future defined not by loyalty to Hitler, but by accountability. The Nuremberg trials represented a turning point in the effort to understand and prosecute Nazi crimes. Prosecutors presented vast documentation showing how the SS, including its military wing, had operated as a central engine of systemic terror, a revelation that echoed across the world. Captured orders, testimonies, and field reports detailed cooperation between Waffen-SS combat units, police battalions, and Einsatzgruppen. The evidence contradicted claims that the Waffen-SS had functioned purely as a battlefield formation, free of ideological purpose. On September 30, 1946, the tribunal formally declared the entire SS a criminal organization. Though exemptions were granted for late conscripts, the ruling placed enormous legal and moral weight on all former members. For tens of thousands of Waffen-SS soldiers held in Allied camps, this judgment cast uncertainty over their futures. Their affiliation alone now marked them as potential participants in state-sponsored atrocities. Across occupied Germany, denazification tribunals attempted to classify millions of citizens. Former Waffen-SS members faced rigorous questioning about their units. Commanders in wartime activities, often under the shadow of collected eyewitness testimonies. Senior officers, including divisional commanders, stood trial for atrocities committed across Europe: Normandy, France, Belgium, Italy, the Balkans, and the Eastern Front. Regions where Waffen-SS formations frequently enforced brutal occupation policies. However, such prosecutions represented only a small fraction of total personnel. Overwhelmed by sheer numbers, Allied authorities prioritized individuals linked to documented crimes, while most rank-and-file members underwent shorter reviews. Conditions within post-war detention camps were extremely harsh. Prisoners lived in makeshift enclosures exposed to wind and rain, surviving on limited rations, while disease, overcrowding, and uncertainty shaped their daily existence. Administrative pressure intensified the hardships. Allied governments struggled to balance justice, humanitarian concerns, and logistical reality. Millions of detainees required processing, transportation, and documentation before any hope of release. By late 1946 and into 1947, many lower-ranking Waffen-SS soldiers were gradually released. They returned to shattered hometowns or wandered through displaced persons camps, uncertain how society or authorities would receive them. Some veterans faced rejection from neighbors and employers who associated the Waffen-SS label with ideological fanaticism, while others concealed their service entirely to avoid scrutiny, suspicion, or social isolation. A smaller and more determined group chose flight over reintegration, utilizing clandestine escape routes later described as rat lines. They acquired forged identity documents and relied on sympathetic intermediaries to leave Europe altogether. In Argentina, under Juan Perón, became a favored destination. Figures like Carl Nicolosi Lech, once a decorated Panzer commander, reestablished their lives there, joining a growing community of exiles from the collapsing Nazi world. Others fled to Francoist Spain, Baathist Syria, or Egypt under King Farouk. These migrations later fueled speculation about organized networks shielding former SS personnel from international justice. Although elements of these routes were supported by religious institutions or intelligence circles, much remained improvised. The myth of a single coordinated rat line persisted, blending documented assistance with post-war rumor and legend. For those who stayed, disillusionment deepened. By 1948, the Waffen-SS name symbolized brutality and fanaticism. Veterans were denied pension, civil service roles, and even recognition within war grave commemorations overseen by local authorities. Under Allied supervision, German administrative bodies continued to classify the Waffen-SS as a criminal entity separate from the Wehrmacht. Rehabilitation seemed unlikely, and public sentiment offered little sympathy. In less than 3 years, an organization that had once brandished immense battlefield influence had disintegrated into scattered, stigmatized individuals. Navigating a fractured society, their collective reputation was sealed at Nuremberg, but their personal fates remained unresolved. The founding of the Federal Republic of Germany in 1949 introduced a fragile political landscape. Its leaders inherited a population containing hundreds of thousands of former Waffen-SS members, many of them young, battle-scarred, and socially stigmatized, a burden that echoed across the new state. West Germany's first government, operating under Allied oversight, sought rapid reconstruction. Yet reintegrating veterans associated with the Waffen-SS posed deep social and political dilemmas, touching both national identity and international credibility. For the Western Allies, the stance remained firm. Waffen-SS veterans were barred from civil service, public employment, and pension systems. Their affiliation designated them as representatives of a criminal ideological apparatus. But post-war realities soon complicated these rules. Millions of demobilized soldiers needed work. Economic revival required labor, and democratic stability required the political goodwill of male voters with wartime backgrounds. As the Cold War escalated, Western strategic interests shifted. A strong, stable West Germany became essential for European security, prompting reconsideration of earlier denazification policies. By the early 1950s, debates about veteran welfare dominated the Bundestag. The Bundesversorgungsgesetz of 1950, designed to support disabled soldiers and war widows, ignited fierce controversy over whether Waffen-SS veterans deserved comparable assistance. Opponents argued that granting benefits to former Waffen-SS men risked moral betrayal and historical distortion. Supporters warned that excluding them entirely could destabilize society and alienate a substantial and politically active population. Konrad Adenauer, West Germany's first chancellor, adopted a pragmatic stance, balancing ethical considerations with political realities. He gradually moved toward limited recognition of certain Waffen-SS veterans, particularly late-war conscripts. In 1953, Adenauer publicly stated that Waffen-SS men had fought as soldiers just like others. Although controversial, the remarks symbolized shifting social attitudes and the slow normalization of a once taboo group within West German society. This shift granted some veterans access to modest pensions and benefits. However, the process remained tightly regulated, prioritizing individuals drafted after 1943 who lacked evidence of ideological training or involvement in documented atrocities. The creation of the Bundeswehr in 1955 introduced a new question. Could former Waffen-SS members serve again in uniform? Official policy allowed it, but public unease and Allied pressure shaped practical outcomes. More than 3,000 former Waffen-SS soldiers applied to join the new army. Background checks revealed ideological concerns, disciplinary issues, or potential political risks, leading authorities to accept only a fraction of applicants. By late 1956, only around 500 former Waffen-SS personnel had been accepted into the Bundeswehr. Even those admitted often concealed their wartime roles to avoid public backlash and scrutiny. Despite lingering barriers, some veterans successfully integrated into West Germany's new military structure. Others found work in civilian sectors relying on personal resilience and their wartime networks for stability in an uneasy society. Still many avoided discussing their service altogether. The 1950s culture of silence shared by perpetrators, bystanders, and civilians enabled former Waffen-SS members to blend into society without confronting the full implications of their pasts. Yet beneath this silence, resentment grew. Some veterans felt abandoned, vilified, or denied recognition. These grievances would soon coalesce into a movement determined to rewrite the public narrative surrounding the Waffen-SS. In 1951, three former Waffen-SS generals, Paul Hauser, Otto Kumm, and Felix Steiner, founded HIAG, initially described as a welfare association meant to support veterans denied pensions. Informal recognition in post-war West Germany, a mission that carried explosive implications. Despite its charitable facade, HIAG rapidly evolved into a political lobby. Its founders aimed not only to assist former comrades, but to challenge the criminal status of the Waffen-SS and reshape its image within the national memory. Yet HIAG leaders insisted that the Waffen-SS had been a purely military institution, unjustly condemned for crimes committed by other wings of the SS. This argument became the cornerstone of a broader revisionist agenda. They claimed Waffen-SS soldiers had fought honorably on Europe's battlefields, separate from the ideological extremism that characterized the SS administration, police units, and concentration camp system responsible for atrocities. This narrative resonated with veterans feeling marginalized and eager for rehabilitation. It also appealed to conservative politicians looking to secure support among former soldiers during Germany's turbulent early post-war elections. Throughout the 1950s, HIAG expanded nationwide, establishing local chapters and organizing reunions. It published newsletters such as Der Freiwillige, offering veterans a platform to connect and reinforce shared interpretations of wartime experiences. HIAG also financed memoirs, divisional histories, and autobiographical accounts portraying Waffen-SS units as elite fighting formations. These publications strategically omitted or minimized involvement in war crimes and ideological indoctrination. By reframing the Waffen-SS as soldiers like any other, HIAG attempted to challenge the conclusions of the Nuremberg trials and reintroduce its veterans into respectable public life without confronting historical realities. In a country still rebuilding its political identity, HIAG's messaging found surprising traction. Some communities welcomed their commemorations, particularly in areas where wartime sacrifices had shaped local memory and generational identity. But this revisionist movement also faced mounting criticism. Scholars, journalists, and survivors argued that HIAG's sanitized portrayal threatened to obscure well-documented atrocities carried out by Waffen-SS divisions on multiple fronts. By the late 1960s, a younger generation of Germans pressed society to confront the Nazi past more directly. University students, historians, and activists challenged earlier narratives that avoided uncomfortable questions about responsibility and guilt. As public discourse shifted, HIAG's influence came under scrutiny. Critics highlighted the organization's political connections, pressure campaigns, and deliberate attempts to manipulate memory rather than foster honest historical examination. In 1978, Der Spiegel published an exposé revealing HIAG's hidden lobbying for pension reforms and its coordinated effort to rehabilitate Waffen-SS veterans politically. The scandal severely undermined the organization's credibility nationwide. Following the exposé, mainstream political parties distanced themselves from HIAG, Public trust eroded and the association's claims increasingly clashed with expanding scholarship on Nazi violence and SS structures. During the 1980s, Hayag struggled to maintain relevance. Its membership declined due to aging veterans' growing societal rejection and persistent protests against Waffen-SS commemorative events across West Germany. Local municipalities increasingly refused to support Hayag gatherings or memorial ceremonies. Activist groups regularly demonstrated at Waffen-SS reunions, arguing that such events threaten democratic values and trivialize the suffering of victims. Despite opposition, Hayag continued operating, sustained by a core of committed veterans determined to defend their wartime service and reject the criminal designation imposed by the Nuremberg Tribunal. By the early 1990s, however, its presence had faded significantly, with membership dwindling and public sentiment turning firmly against revisionist interpretations. Hayag officially dissolved in 1992, ending 4 decades of organized advocacy, yet dissolution did not erase its impact. The narratives Hayag crafted stories emphasizing heroism while downplaying ideology continued circulating in private circles. Self-published histories and certain strands of nationalist memory, the movement's long shadow revealed the enduring power of memory politics. Even without formal organization, the revisionist framing persisted, shaping debates about guilt, justice, and the Waffen-SS's place within German historical consciousness. The fall of the Berlin Wall and Germany's reunification fundamentally reshaped historical inquiry. Newly accessible archives from the former East Germany revealed extensive documentation about Waffen-SS operations previously unknown or tightly restricted to Western researchers. Soviet-era files combined with survivor testimonies dismantled lingering claims that certain Waffen-SS divisions had operated as apolitical, purely military formations. Evidence showed deep coordination with police battalions and Einsatzgruppen actions. Historians uncovered internal reports revealing ideological indoctrination, sanctioned brutality, and systematic participation in occupation policies. Together, these archives closed many of the interpretive gaps that earlier revisionist narratives had exploited. As scholarship accumulated, public debates intensified. Journalists revealed that thousands of former Waffen-SS members were still receiving pensions under post-war legislation originally designed for general military veterans. The revelations caused national and international outrage, especially when contrasted with the limited compensation provided to Holocaust survivors. Critics argued that the disparity reflected unresolved moral contradictions within Germany's post-war legal framework. Efforts to revise pension laws proved difficult. Many protections for veterans had been established through early political compromises, and overturning them risked reopening divisive debates about collective guilt and generational responsibility. Beyond Germany, the Waffen-SS legacy intertwined with post-Soviet nationalism. In Latvia, Estonia, and Ukraine, veterans of locally raised SS divisions were sometimes reinterpreted as anti-Soviet resistance fighters, fueling controversy. Annual marches in Riga, honoring the 15th and 19th Latvian Waffen-SS divisions, ignited fierce criticism from Jewish organizations, Western governments, and the European Parliament, which condemned the events as historical distortion. Supporters of these commemorations argued they represented defiance against Soviet repression rather than celebration of Nazism. The controversy underscored the difficulty of separating wartime collaboration from nationalist memory politics. Inside Germany, attitudes toward the Waffen-SS hardened. Public admiration became taboo, and display of SS symbols remained strictly prohibited under criminal law, reflecting strong commitment to preventing extremist revival. Yet digital communication created new challenges. Online extremist groups circulated Waffen-SS imagery, framing its units as icons of strength, discipline, or European brotherhood, repackaging historical symbols into modern ideological propaganda. German authorities repeatedly intervened, blocking websites prosecuting offenders and warning that such appropriations exploited historical trauma while threatening democratic institutions built after the collapse of the Nazi regime. Meanwhile, academic research achieved new depth. Scholars like Sönke Neitzel and Peter Longerich analyzed the internal culture of the Waffen-SS, showing how military practice, ideological indoctrination, and systemic violence were fundamentally inseparable. Social historians examine the culture of post-war silence, revealing how former soldiers, civilians, and political leaders often avoided confronting Waffen-SS crimes, contributing to decades of incomplete or delayed moral reckoning. Comparative studies demonstrated how West Germany's early reintegration policies differed sharply from East Germany's harsher punitive stance, illustrating how political context shaped the treatment and memory of former Waffen-SS personnel. And international scholars further highlighted how Holocaust education, legal reforms, and generational shifts gradually reshaped public understanding of the Waffen-SS, replacing earlier ambiguities with clearer acknowledgement of systemic culpability. Today, only a small number of former Waffen-SS soldiers remain alive. Their personal stories, filtered through decades of silence, trauma, or defensiveness, now occupy a more nuanced place within historical inquiry. And these final witnesses disappear each year, leaving behind archives, testimonies, and contested memories. Their fading presence underscores the urgency of preserving accurate historical narratives against revisionist reinterpretation. The Waffen-SS legacy endures in debates, controversies, and far-right appropriations. Yet it also stands as a stark reminder of how ideology, obedience, and militarism can align to produce devastating consequences for humanity. In the 80 years after the Third Reich's collapse, Germany continues to wrestle with the meaning of responsibility. The Waffen-SS remains a central case study in this struggle, illustrating the difficulty of reconciling justice with national memory. Its history teaches that battles over interpretation often persist long after armies disband. The conflicts of memory, shaped by politics, trauma, and generational change, sometimes endure more fiercely than wars fought with weapons. The story of the Waffen-SS ultimately functions not as a tale of military achievement, but as a cautionary chronicle of ideology's power, collective denial, and the fragile boundaries safeguarding democratic societies. Today, the Waffen-SS stands as a warning about how deeply historical narratives can be contested, and how long the echoes of a violent ideology can last even after its soldiers, institutions, and banners have disappeared.